Welcome to the For the Love of the Game podcast, episode 21, the All-Star Edition episode with your hosts, Jefferson Belfort and Brian Hernandez. How are you doing, Brian?
Doing good. Like you mentioned, the All-Star break episode. We recorded this on Saturday, so last night we had like the All-Star Rising game, the celebrity game. It's a lot of fun to watch. It's always a good time to watch, the All-Star break. And it's exciting to think about in the future of like this is now the home stretch of playoff contention and all that. So it's really exciting. It's a tight race. We have a lot to talk about today. I'm pumped. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing pretty good. I didn't actually get to see the Rising Star game, but the formatting of it sounded pretty cool. I'll probably take some time today to try to see some highlights out of it, see who looked really good out of that game. And, I'm happy for All-Star Weekend. It's always a fun time around our All-Star Weekend, especially Saturday night where all the events are being held. It's really taken precedent over the actual game. But, last year was an actual fun game to see with the new formatting of how they played it. And it looked like a lot of the players were engaged last year. I hope that's the same for this year. But yeah, let's go right into the topics that we have for today. So the topics we have presented for today is, as we're reaching the All-Star weekend, there's a few players that we deemed surprise players that we're going to go into, some disappointing players, and then go into a little bit of pretenders and contenders of each conference, and who are the biggest threats out of each conference. Are you ready, Brian?
Yeah, man, let's get into it.
All right, perfect. So let's start off with the surprising players of the first half of this season, the unofficial first half of the season, because we're already over the halfway mark for the season. So who do you got, Brian?
So I think this one's probably the easiest one. I'm going to go with first. Get him out of the way. And that's the man that during this offseason, no one really thought was going to be anything special. A lot of people thought that this player was overpaid, and now he's leading his team to, I think, the second seed right now in the East, and that is DeMar DeRozan. That, honestly, it's pretty shocking how much of a change he is or how well he's playing compared to even like last year. And like last year, he was the man in San Antonio, and he was putting up numbers, and he was actually very impressive. But everyone's like, he did in San Antonio. They weren't really playing for anything. Didn't equal to any game or wins or losses really. And it was pretty funny because you think about it in the offseason too. Like people were talking about like he's going to potentially sign like a minimum deal with the Lakers. And instead he gets this pretty big contract with Chicago. Everyone was making fun of them. But yet DeMar DeRozan's playing fantastic. This is actually his best career, his best season of his career. He's averaging 28 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. He's actually shooting the best from the 3-point line of his career at right now 34%, and generally he was at 28%. That's his average in the past, and he's had some really bad seasons from shooting from 3. But he's doing well. Man, he's leading Chicago, and it's a real big surprise right now that DeMar DeRozan is playing this well.
Yeah, no, I agree. He's actually someone I had on my list as well too. The shocking part about it is how how they've integrated so well as a team, to just gel completely. There was questions about that, but I think we've always since the beginning of the season thought that this was going to be a team that would be on the rise. We may have not thought they would be the number 1 seed, but we did, because I think they're at a tie for the 1 seed right now with the Heat.
Actually, you're right.
But it is a pleasant surprise to see how he's playing, because it's kind of interesting too to say he's a surprise, but it shouldn't shock us because this is kind of the player he was when he was on the Raptors. He led that team with Kyle Lowry to first seeds for a few years in the time of LeBron, in the East. So it shouldn't shock us that he's playing this well, but it should also make us weary and think about what will the playoffs look like. That's the true test of if this DeMar DeRozan that we're seeing right now is truly ready or capable to take his team to that next level. Because for years that was the knock, and that's essentially the reason why he got traded from the Raptors to the Spurs. Those few years he spent in the Spurs, I guess, grew him. Because there was a lot of, I wouldn't say turmoil, but the Spurs are just not the team that they were 20 years ago. Are in the midst of that 20-year run that they had. But he still put up numbers. It's just now it's good to see that those numbers still translate into winning. So he's definitely on top of my list too for surprising players. The next player I wanted to talk about was a player that, he's always, in his short career, he's always looked good, but, sometimes injuries provide more opportunities, and it has landed this guy into a role where, I don't think anyone foreseed this team being this good. And that player is Darius Garland. Darius Garland, from just taking last year, had a pretty good sophomore year. He was averaging close to 18 points, 6 assists, but, he took a jump, not a crazy aggressive jump in stats wise, from that 17-6 to now having around a 20-8. And like I said, that might not look like a big jump on the paper, but if you actually watch those Cavs games, the offense really feeds through him, and the way how he's playing is just phenomenal for the Cavs. He's clearly become the leader. It's kind of sad because it's kind of moving Colin Sexton out of the way, but it shows how capable he is and ready to be a point guard as well. So he's a pretty good combo guard in that sense, and leading this team to honestly new heights that I don't think anyone foreseed when the season started. And then just a little more perspective into how well this team has been going is in the last 5 games, he's been averaging around 25 points now. He slowed down with the assists a little bit. He's back down to 6 for the last couple games, but he's shooting an unreal field goal percentage of 56% and shooting from 3, close to 53%. And then obviously he's literally in these last 5 games close to a 50-50-90. He has 87, around 88% free throw percentage. So guys is really going off lately, and there's a reason why he made the All-Star team this year, and he's clearly one of my favorite surprise players this year.
He's definitely one of the ones. Like, I love that he's on this list because he's one of the guys that like is truly a surprise, because it's just like the opportunity came, like the perfect opportunity came for him to thrive, and he's doing so well. Of like, the Cavs are themselves just a huge surprise of how well all their young players are playing and playing together, and how well all these pieces fit together. And Darius Garland is at the helm of that, and he's playing fantastic, shooting fantastic. He puts the Cavs in a tough position on what to do in this offseason, and whether to extend Colin Sexton, because I've always kind of not really liked that pairing too much. And even there was reports this last offseason of the Cavs wanted to make Darius Garland their future and were looking to move away from Colin Sexton. So now it kind of seems like their justification was correct there of like Darius Garland is that guy who's next for them. Pretty fantastic. I like that pick a lot. My next guy is someone who was almost traded a couple days ago, last week, and that is Tyrese Maxi. And that right now, Tyrese Maxi has honestly been one of the biggest surprises for me, specifically because of how he was last year compared to this year. And last year, as his rookie year, he was good. He was actually very good for a rookie coming off the bench. And, he was picking the late 20s, or I think early 20s. But even still, I mean, he went from like last season, he played 61 games. He only started 8 games. He was averaging 8 points, like he shot 30% from 3. Like he had a couple pretty big playoff games, and you kind of saw like a little bit like potential there of this is a guy that could potentially step up into a bigger role. And then now this season, with Ben Simmons not playing for the Sixers and all this other stuff, he has been excelling. He stepped up to the plate. The man's averaging 17 points, 3.5 rebounds, 5 assists. He's shooting 39% from 3. Like everyone expected the Sixers to be pretty like average and meh this year. And he's one of the big reasons why that they're actually still, in the contention race. And I am super impressed by him. What do you think about Tyrese Maxey this year?
Yeah, no, another player that's been given way by unforeseen like circumstances,
Yeah.
right? Definitely he's taken the helm after Ben Simmons. And, he's more of a traditional guard than Ben Simmons was. But it's cool to see how he plays does not affect Embiid's way of playing either. I've always been a believer that some of the reasons why the Sixers wouldn't work is just the two guys that are their two best players play two different styles of basketball.
Yeah.
And the pace of play is dramatically different if you're feeding one way or the other. Ben Simmons looking to speed up the game, and Joel Embiid is looking to slow down the game. And that's why in the playoffs, it never really works. Maxey seems to be the type of player that could fit with either one. He can be fast when he needs to be fast, moving the ball up tempo, being in transition, getting to the rim. Recently with the acquisition of James Harden has been in his year being a little bit more aggressive as well too. So Maxey looks like honestly a future star if given the opportunity to keep on growing his game. So it's interesting. It's so he's a good person to add to this list in my mind because of that.
Right. Who do you have? Do you have another one?
I do have another one. So another. Well, I wouldn't say this unforeseen as it's more of like off season. A couple players decided to move around. A couple players decided to leave teams that had a long standing with. And, you have a guy like Kyle Lowry that brought in a lot of energy, a lot of defensive presence. He set a culture with the Raptors in his time with the Raptors. So to see someone like that leave the team, kind of sit back and you think, what is that team going to look like after that? And I think a lot of the reasons why the team has maintained its culture, has maintained that same relevance of like how to play good and, how to play their style of basketball is because of this player. And I'm choosing Fred VanVleet for this one. Fred VanVleet has taken, in this starting role, has taken a considerable jump from where he was last year. Granted, he wasn't starting, but his career numbers are around 13 points per game, 4 assists per game, 3 rebounds per game, right? That has drastically jumped this year from not close. So his points for his career is closer to 14, but he's close to 22 points per game this year, close to 5 rebounds per game this year, and is averaging around 7 assists a game. He's taken his game to a level that shows that it's sustainable as him being a starter, and it has the Raptors in contention for not only being outside of the play-in, but also, if they stay in the play-in, they have a real viable chance of actually making it into the playoffs because of how he has been playing. But obviously other players on the team are impacted that as well. But seeing his jump in this season has been something very refreshing. And honestly, I was looking up his stats on Stat News, and one of the funniest things that I saw there was that they said that he's around 6'1". If you look at him playing, he does not look like he's 6'1". He looks like he's being given a generous sizing on this one. So like the size he is plays a factor into it as well. And for a game that is getting continuously longer and taller, players finding a guy around this height to be effective is something that is very valuable, and he's become something of a you can't move away from this type of player if you're the Raptors, and that's why they gave them the money this year. So It's good to see that he's making up for what he got paid.
And he's an all-star this year, and he deserves
Exactly.
it. It's like, think about how many great players there are this season, especially in the East. And the fact that, like, you had to put Fred VanVleet on this list. Like, this man's playing so well. His team's playing extremely well, especially from where their season was last season to where they are now. Like, it's extremely impressive. I mean, even like last season, he still had like a pretty good season, but I can only imagine like how tough it was for them to pretty much play in, what was it, Orlando or in Florida that they were playing?
In Tampa.
Tampa. Yeah. And like Fred VanVleet leading his team, it's kind of crazy how much he's like, he had that leadership from Kyle Lowry and took over like that role. Really impressive. Definitely deserves to be on this list. Do you want to move on to the biggest disappointments?
I am ready for that. I'll take the helm off of that one.
All right, go for it.
Actually, the funny thing is my 2 players are actually on the same team, but they're disappointing in 2 different ways. So I'll start with one player that it's disappointing because this player just cannot find consistency in staying on the court in their game right now because of that. By all means, he would be an all-NBA player if he could stay healthy. He would be in the All-Star game if he could stay healthy. He would be an all-defensive player if he could stay healthy. But the issues are piling and piling up for this player, and it's leading to his team looking a lot worse than they had to be because he's just not able to be around.
Yeah.
And, that player is Anthony Davis. It's sad to see that he's not able to be on the court all the time. He's recently just got the ankle sprain, I think it was.
Yeah.
Were you able to see that, Brian?
Yeah, it looks pretty bad.
All right. Just a couple of technical difficulties, but we're back. And just wrapping up on the Anthony Davis thing. Yeah, it was a gross injury to see. With that in mind, looking at some of his splits, one that really has stood out to me, and considering him as a player, he's gotten a lot better with this percentage. But this year, he's regressed to a really bad number. Is his 3-point percentage. I remember 2 years ago, he hit that 3-pointer on Kobe Day, on Kobe Bryant Day,
yeah.
224 against the Nuggets on Jokic. But this year, Anthony Davis is averaging around 18% from the 3-point line. I can't tell you how many he's taken, but for an 18%, that does not sound
That's bad.
pretty good. So the one thing is the points still look consistent. Rebounds are pretty consistent. There's a little drop off. Assists, it's actually a little slightly higher, but his free throw percentage went down as well too. And it's starting to become an issue when you think about the whole team, because you're thinking about all of the inefficient players, how many points they're leaving on the table. You have that issue also with LeBron, because LeBron is having an amazing season this year. But LeBron, when it matters, can be inefficient. We saw that the other day where I don't remember. I think it was the Warriors last Saturday. He got fouled at the 3-point line, and he had three free throws to send it to overtime, and he missed the first one. So, as we see more and more teams have more efficient type of players, it's sad to see the Lakers are trailing on that side, where they have guys that they cannot trust down the stretch to be a certified bucket. And it is affecting the team. It is making life hard for that team, and they just don't mesh as well. So first guy on my list, like I said, is Anthony Davis. What do you think about that?
Yeah, Anthony Davis does deserve to be on this list. And it's like, I like how you prefaced it. It's not because of his talent. It's because of how he's just not able to stay on the floor. And it's really sad. And the Lakers with Anthony Davis, a healthy Anthony Davis this year, would be a different team. They look way better. It's just this guy, something about him this season, he just can't catch a break. And constantly with that ankle injury you mentioned, it's I think they said at least 4 weeks he's going to be out. So another month he's going to be gone. Really sad to see. Anthony Davis deserves to be on this list. It's funny that you mentioned too that your two guys are on the same team, because my two guys are on the same team. My number one pick here is Julius Randle. This man is a certified bum. No. He's been playing better recently. But it hasn't helped them at all. I think their last 10 games are probably 1 for 9. And they've blown 3 20-point leads in the last 7 games. And they're just looking really bad. Julius Randle, on the other hand, looking more like his last season self. But for the rest of the 50 games they played this season, he has been god awful. He is the most inefficient high usage player in the NBA currently. He is just last season, he shot 41% from 3. This season, shooting 30% from 3 on 5 attempts a game. And it's just the reason why he played so well last season was because of that 3-pointer. It was because of his ability to make those tough mid-range jumpers. And as soon as that goes away, everything else goes away. It's so easy to double team him, because all what he wants to do is just drive to the rim and throw some crazy 360 passes that he's going to do a turnover. Man, it's so crazy of last season, how he led the Knicks to be the 4th seed, and they looked really good, and he was the leader, and this is a huge cultural change, to now him fans hating him playing terrible, him not even being anywhere close to consideration for the All-Star team. Like, it is, in my opinion, probably the biggest like regression in a player's career, especially from where he went from like last season and how good he looked to now. Well, one of two players. I'm imagining your second guy is is another guy that could be contention for this, but man, it is so sad to see. I hope he continues the stretch right now where he's playing a lot better, especially for the Knicks' sake. But man, Julius Randle, if there's anyone that deserves to be on this list, it has to be him. What do you think?
I agree. And I'll take a different stab at it. It's not just the performance; it's the way how he carries himself. The body language this year has regressed severely. The way how he treats members on his team, members in the media, members on his staff, it has really, really irked a lot of people. And, there is a lot, I will give this to him, is that their refs do target him a lot. We do see that a lot this year. But at the same time, there's a point where you make that jump. He made that jump in his career last year, right? You're going to have to expect and realize no matter even if you look good or you looked amazing last year, right? There's still, best words to put to it, levels to this, right? Yeah. And I think sometimes Julius Randle wants the type of calls that a LeBron would get. And he's just not warranted that yet. And it's crazy and it's sad to say that that's how like the league works. But there's just certain type of play, certain type of level of respect that you get from the game, from the refs, that you get that over time. So I think he's kind of missing a couple of those steps, and that has affected how he's been playing. And like you said, in this last stretch, he has been playing very well. Actually, on Twitter, there's a post that that's been going around a little bit for, I don't remember the exact reporter that told him about the Knicks were open to trading him.
Mark Berman.
Yes, that's who. I thought that's who it was. But so after that, they showed all of the splits of where he's at, and he's doing pretty well in these last couple of games. But is it generating wins? It's not right now.
Yeah.
And it's sad to see that, and especially in the midst of like February having 3 blown 20-point leads within a game is not helping his case, and is only proving to be why he's on this list.
Yeah. A big was something that I heard was pretty interesting. Fred Katz, who reports for the Knicks on The Athletic, he was on a podcast recently. He was talking to a player in the past about like when players have a bad streak. And the NBA player that he was speaking to, I think it was probably like Bradley Beal, but he was pretty much saying like, when you see somebody playing this poorly from where they usually are for this long, it's probably not like a game thing. It's probably more like something happening. It has to be happening in this guy's personal life. Like, and especially you see with his body language, you see all this other stuff. Cause I mean, just like it's crazy that you can see someone go from 71 games, play fantastic basketball, to 50 games this year playing god awful basketball. Like a lot of times it's not just basketball. So hopefully there's some turnaround here, but still this man probably deserves to be number 1 on this list. Who do you got next?
And
sorry.
just to round that in together too is it's sad. It's sad to see it like that. And I don't like to bring in personals, but sure. You're right. Is a lot of people think about, I think the best example for this was last year with Tyler Hero, and his personal life definitely you could tell it definitely is something that probably was affecting how he was playing. Because look at how he's playing this year,
Yeah.
and he definitely should have been someone in consideration for surprises this year.
I had him as consideration. Yeah.
So, it could be that. And he is bringing in a child. He did bring in a child this year as well, Julius Randle, just like Tyler Hero had last year. So it could play a factor in it. No one will really ever know until Julius Randle says something. But, it's just sad to see how much he has regressed.
Yes.
So, yep, the next player that I have on this list, and like I said, they're both on the same team. There was a couple more opinionated based like articles put out recently where where it addressed that the Lakers management said to their stars that this was what they're doing, this was their choice, so make it work. And a direct quote from Ramon Shelburne is that the Lakers front office, and that includes ownership, decided, you guys got yourself into this. This is the bet that you made. With all of these future Hall of Famers, this is your choice of roster and team. Go make it work. We're not going to mortgage our future because this team isn't working yet. And that is very telling because it ties in the last person that I said that is disappointing to the next person that I'm going to say is disappointing this year is Russell Westbrook. We've seen a steady decline out of Russell the last couple of seasons. He is the type of player that, he plays with so much energy. He plays with so much ferocity when he's on the court, right? That you appreciate when you see that because not a lot of players play 110 every game, right? But Russell Westbrook does, right? So it hurts to say that he's regressed this bad, but the guy has regressed so bad. So just in comparison from his career numbers are around 23 points per game, 7 rebounds, close to 8 rebounds per game, and then close to 9 assists per game. And, surprisingly, his field goal percentage doesn't really change as much, and his three-point percentage doesn't change as much from his career numbers. But when you take points, assists into account, he's taken he has dropped from where he was in his career, where he's now averaging around 18 points and close to 7 assists per game. And, you look at that, and like I said, stats shouldn't be the indication for why someone's playing bad, or you shouldn't look strictly at stats and say that they're not impactful because of stats. But when you watch the games, you see that Russell Westbrook just does not fit, and it does not make any sense. And to make even matters worse, looking back at his last 5 games, the guy's averaging 14 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. You could have got that from Dennis Schroeder if you kept him.
Yeah.
And you would have paid it way less because you're now on the hook for $44 million a year for Russell Westbrook's contract. Mm-hmm. So it's very, very sad to see how much he has regressed. But I just also think that this is just not the fit for him. Russell Westbrook has shown in the last couple of years of how he has been jumping around from team to team these last couple of years is that he just does not play well with another running star. Mm-hmm. He needs to run the show by himself and have complementary players, and that's when he looks the best. But is someone ready to give that to him at this point in his career? I don't think so. And it may tell the story of that he's closer to the end of his career than he is to the beginning of it. 14 years in the league, and he's, like I said, dropped and regressed severely.
It's crazy to see how this guy went from like MVP seasons, record breaking seasons to where he is now. And I mean, just look at it. There's a reason why the Lakers aren't playing him in fourth quarters in late game situations. He's on the bench because he's a liability. He can't be out there. He doesn't help them to win the game. And especially, like you mentioned, from a guy that goes from a superstar, all-star, MVP, all this accolades and everything, to can't even play him in the fourth quarter in a regular season game, that's a pretty steep drop. And right now, Westbrook is probably the worst contract in the NBA. No one wants to be stuck with that much money for a guy that is not going to help your team. It's crazy to see like how the Wizards were able to like fleece the Lakers for that much and get like Kuzma and all these other guys that are playing really well for the Wizards versus what the Lakers got in return. Like, that's really bad.
Yep. And then just one last thing to tie it all together too is, just since we're talking about the same team, is going back to the mortgaging your future situation. This is what sucks the worst about the situation for them, is that they did believe that it was going to be a rite of passage for Anthony Davis to be the star after LeBron is planning on retiring or moving on to go play with Bronny somewhere, right? And that just does not look like a viable option anymore. And it's squarely on the fact that he just cannot remain healthy. And you have a guy with a contract like this, Westbrook, and then you have an aging LeBron. No matter how good he looks right now, LeBron is getting close to 40 years old, and there's going to be a moment where Father Time has to catch up, and catch up to everyone. So it may take some time, but it does eventually catch up with all of us, So it's just sad.
It's funny that you bring up like LeBron. Everyone's always expecting like, this is the season LeBron is like done for. He's going to regress, and he keeps getting better and better. And it's just like, it's only a matter of time. But like, this man, he's one of the most durable guys in the entire NBA. It's crazy how many miles he has, like how many games he's played and all this stuff, what he's done in the NBA and what he's still able to do now at his age. Crazy. Like you, my next guy on the same team as Julius Randle, one of their big offseason acquisitions that like wasn't seemed to be planned, but it did happen. It was hugely talked about. I talked about it on this podcast that I thought it was a gigantic move. I was really excited to see it. And that's Kemba Walker. Man, Kemba Walker, like, the fall from grace is pretty hard. I mean, he's been regressing from like since his knee injuries and all this other stuff. I mean, four-time All-Star. Like, this guy was really like one of the better point guards in the NBA. And then now from this season, the drop is pretty significant. Just even looking at the points per game he went from last season, not playing a whole lot. He played 43 games with all injuries and everything. But like when he did play, he did look really good for the Celtics. He had 19 points a game. He was shooting like good splits and everything. And then this season, he went from 19 points a game to 11 points a game. And he's taking 10 shots a game. Like, it's just it's just a show of his former self, which is really sad to see. We saw earlier in the season where they kind of were forced to bench him just because of like, if you looked at all the statistics of he is not helping the team at all the advanced statistics, like you take Kemba Walker out, the team performs extremely well. You put Kemba Walker in, the team is one of the worst performing teams in the NBA. Take him out, they insert him back into the lineup. He plays great for like 3 games. He had that 150-point game where they lost anyway. And then now he's back to that former self, and it's just not looking great at all. Man, it is really sad to see. Like there's some other players that I thought about putting in this list, like Damian Lillard. He wasn't having a great season, but he has a lot of injuries. I mean, Porzingis, like he's actually having one of his better seasons, but man, this guy's still not playing, and like it's such a disappointment from his giant contract. But then you look at Kemba Walker, and it's like this guy, he's playing these games. He says he's healthy and all this stuff, but he can barely drive to the rim. He can barely do anything. His assist is at an all-time low, and like he's just not helping the team at all. And this guy was one of the biggest players in the NBA. He's only 31 years old. Like that shouldn't be too bad. That's my guy. What do you think about Kemba?
Yeah, again, another sad thing to see someone's career like regressing. But he is the opposite of what we were talking about for Fred VanVleet.
Yeah.
The size is definitely at a disadvantage for him. And as, like I said, the league is getting longer and taller, and, a lot of more versatile type of players that can be guards, wings, and even at times be big men. So, that does not fare well for a player like Kemba, where his body is betraying him and his knees aren't there. His knees aren't there like where it was before. And, the points speak to that. Like you said, the drop down from 19 to 11. The way how he plays, the way how he's not impacting winning anymore is all signs that it sucks, but his career is getting closer to, just like Westbrook, getting closer to its end than it's the beginning. Yeah. So I think he could find a way to reinvent his game and be productive, but a lot of the time it's about like sacrificing your ego. Yeah. And he has shown signs of that, but I don't think he shows signs of that when he's playing. He says the right things. He just doesn't show it when he's playing.
It's I could see him, like, if he was a backup guard, that's a guy you would love to have coming off your bench. But as a starter, it just doesn't seem like it's it anymore. It's kind of like thinking about how the progression of Carmelo Anthony's career. This guy was fantastic, one of the better players in the NBA, to now, like, at one point couldn't even make it on a team, coming off the bench and all this stuff. Like, seems like that's going to be his role going forward if things don't change. Yeah, really, really sad to see.
Yep.
Do you want to move on to the next topic?
Yes, I am so ready for this. So I guess I'll do the rundown on the East teams. You'll do the rundown on the West?
Let's do it.
All right. Okay, perfect. So our first team, we'll just go from do you want to do play-in teams as well, or we want to just save this from 1 to 8 at this point?
We can do it just from 1 to 8. I mean, yeah, you go, and then I'll follow your lead.
Okay. It's pretty hard to say someone's a contender in the play.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
All right. So we'll start off with the East leading Miami Heat that are sharing that seeding with the Bulls right now. But the Miami Heat, what do you think? Are they a pretender or a contender in your mind right now?
This is the one that I struggled with the most, honestly. I mean, Miami playing fantastic. Like you say, they're tied for number 1 right now. But there's something in me that's like, I try to think about, you look at all these other teams. They have 1 or 2 like gigantic superstars. And the best player in Miami is like Jimmy Butler, who's a star, very good player, all-star game. I just feel like they're missing a little something. I can't put them over that edge as of now. So I'm gonna have to say pretender. What do you think?
I think I'm going to go the other way around with this.
God.
I think I'm going to say they are a contender. I just like the cohesion of
Yeah.
this team. And it's a lot about the coach than it is the players. They will always maintain that Miami culture, no matter who gets in there. It's crazy how it's always like that. I think we probably lived through in the last 20 years just a handful of losing seasons for Miami, right? And a lot of that is the infrastructure that Pat Riley built. And then now that Eric Spoelstra has been implementing over the last 10 years. He's regarded as one of the best, if not the best, coach in the NBA right now. And it shows, if you give him even just a little bit, he'll find a way to make that a successful team. So because of that, I do think they have the type of players that are movable and flexible with any type of lineup, which is showing into them consistently winning, even if someone's out. And that's like they have like war horses in my mind. Is like you got to go through Pat Lowry, you got to go through PJ Tucker, you got to go through Jimmy Butler, you have to go through Bam. Like that's a lot to throw at someone in the playoffs, But I do have a hint of thinking that they're a pretender just because there's not, like you said, that solidified guy that I would say is going to be. I think there's the takeover badge or something in 2K. Like none of them have that real part to them. Yeah. Hero is the closest to that, but he's still relatively young in his career. And I know he did it in the bubble, but it's sad to say the bubble is just not the same experience as being back in front of a ruckus crowd, full attendance, that's a whole different experience. So I would love to see what he looks like in this playoff because last year they all looked like they were not ready for that when they went up against the Bucks. So we'll see.
That's where, like, I'm not saying Miami's not a good team. I'm just trying to think like contender, like who do I see making the Eastern Conference Finals? Like who do I see there that has a real shot of winning that game? And that's where I just struggle. Like Miami, it's really hard for me to see them overcoming some of these gigantic superstars in the playoffs. But like they play fantastic team defense. Like you mentioned, like the team is extremely good. Like this is something that I could have gone either way. I wanted to go for the hot take. We're going pretender from my side. Who you got next?
So, like I said, tied first in the East is the Chicago Bulls, bolstering a really good team. Zach LaVine actually coming back from injury. He's going to be in the All-Star game this Sunday. What do you think they are, a pretender or a contender, Brian?
This is another one that like it was very close in my mind. I remember at the beginning of the season, I thought this was like their offseason was so bad. I thought there was no chance they're going to be able to contend or anything, but they proved me wrong. I'm listing them as contenders. They like it all fits so well. What I'm really imagining is like the Chicago Bulls when they're healthy. And I'm hoping like, they have all their guys, Alex Caruso and all of them like by playoff time, because when they're healthy and they're like, this team is pretty next level. And it's really surprising. DeMar DeRozan's kind of like been that superstar. Like if you're going to give the ball to someone at the end of the game and you want it to be a mid-range shot, you have to give it to DeMar DeRozan. That guy's automatic from there. Like this team is something else. I've been proven wrong. I have to go with contenders.
I think I'm going to go the opposite route again.
Hey.
I am going to go with they are pretenders in my mind. And it goes back to something I said earlier in this podcast is as much as I'm astonished by what DeMar DeRozan is doing in the season, there's just something about DeMar DeRozan that he hasn't proven in the playoffs yet. And he could team could very well be playing the likes of a team like the Nets in that first round.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, I don't know. It could go one way or the other, and it would be a similar type of series as what we saw with the Suns and the Lakers last year, where it's a flip of the coin. And that kind of scares me for them that they wouldn't be able to withstand that with the revamped version of what the Nets are. But at the same time, like I do see why they should be considered contenders because of just how everything gels and how everything works. But I'm going to lean more to the lack of experience in the playoffs for many of them. DeMar DeRozan is only known losing when he goes to the playoffs. And they're kind of green in that sense where they just haven't been to the playoffs yet, and I don't know how that's going to affect them, but we'll see. But that's what I got for them.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Like I said, for both Miami and Chicago, I could have gone either way. Like I think they're both like so comparable, which is pretty funny that like they're both the number one seed right now. They're tied for number one. Like they have so many great players on both teams, but I do like that you brought up the playoff experience and like for Chicago, it is very green. A lot of those guys, even Nikola Vucevic and like all of them haven't really been to the playoffs too much and like even got outside the first round. So that's something that they really have to we have to keep an eye on going forward. But not mad at it. Not mad at it. Who do you got next?
So next on our list is, and they've been steadily climbing up to the top of the East, is the Philadelphia 76ers, now bolstering a team of James Harden to pair up with soon-to-be MVP Joel Embiid, and a lot of complementary pieces like Tyrese Maxi, Bible, Tobias Harris. I'm sorry, but they look pretty good this season. So, what do you got, Brian? Pretender or contender?
So this one to me, barring any injuries to James Harden or Joel Embiid, I have to put them as contenders. Like, it's surprising how well they've been playing without like Ben Simmons this entire season. I mean, they did just give up Seth Curry and Andre Drummond, who's been playing really well for them this season. But to add James Harden, like we also have to see how that looks together. It's hard to imagine it not looking very great. But still, at the end of the day, like it's just too much talent. A lot of their guys are stepping up, playing extremely well. I find it hard for them not to be contenders on this list. What do you think?
Perfect. I think I'm on the same boat with you on that one, is that they are contenders. You brought up the Ben Simmons situation, and the Sixers are so uniquely different than a lot of other teams. Is you usually don't get two types of generational talent.
Yep.
And that's the reason why, even without Ben Simmons, I think they still look good.
Yeah.
It's because Joel Embiid is one of a kind. It's similar to Ben Simmons, is like he's one of a kind in the way how he plays. And both of them may have not meshed because, like I said earlier, is different types of play style. But they, like, I mean, Joel Embiid, the way how he plays just allows for success to breed with the rest of his teammates and for them to feel empowered and be a part of everything. So now think about that with James Harden there as well. Only time will tell if either one of them gets injured, but that is a major concern that you brought up that should be thought about when you're making this assessment on them too, because it could very well be just one series where Joel Embiid gets injured, God forbid, and now James Harden has to do what he didn't want to do at the Nets towards the end of his career. And what type of James Harden are you going to get at that point? Are you going to get Game 7, 2018 Western Conference Harden, or are you getting regular season blazing Harden,
Yeah.
So we'll see.
It's definitely like as soon as one of those two guys go down, especially Joel Embiid, as soon as Joel Embiid goes down, if he goes down, it's instant. Like they turn into pretenders. Like he's the heart and soul of that team right now, and it's so scary that the heart and soul of your team is an injury prone big. Like that's a very scary thing. Yeah. Who do you got next?
Yes. So we have the very young, but the very ready Cleveland Cavaliers. Cleveland Cavaliers, boasting a team of Jared Allen, Darius Garland. Why am I going blank right now? Oh, Karis LeVert and their amazing rookie Evan Mobley.
Ooh, this one is. It pains me to say this because I'm a pretty big fan of what the Cavs are doing this year. Like they've impressed me so much. All their young guys, all their players, like I'm a huge fan of. I think they're fantastic. I think give me an extra 2 years and I put them as contenders. But as of right now, I'm gonna leave them as pretenders. I think what they're doing this so far, extremely impressive. I think they even have a chance to go to the second round. It's just that, and especially in a different year, if this was like 10 years ago, I'd say instant contenders. It's just that there's so much competition this year that it really pains me to like not say that they can come over teams like Brooklyn and like Philly, like we're mentioning. Like it makes it really hard. I have to put them as pretenders.
I agree. I'm on the same page with that. I do have them as pretender as well. Another team that is very green, lacking that experience. Not only lacking that experience, lacking the coach that has the experience in that same sense. But they are definitely going to be a fun watch for the playoffs. Definitely to see them in the national stage is going to wake up a lot of fans of the league to see what the Cavs are actually putting together over there. But as of right now, they would be playing the Bucks, and I just don't think that that's a good matchup for them in that first round if they would have to play them, and because of that, all the teams that I see in this area that could fall into 5 are if, let's say, the Cavs fall to 5 and one of them go up, I think all of them in my mind right now would beat the Cavs in the 7-game series. So I love what I'm seeing. I'm loving the development of these players, but I don't think that they are a contender right now, and that's why I'm going to hit them with the pretender label.
It's like you could say like I'm contradicting myself when I mention it. I feel like the Cavs are pretenders because of their experience versus like the Chicago Bulls, who also don't have a lot of playoff experience, but those guys have all been in the league a lot longer. They're all like over 25, and like look at DeMar DeRozan at 32 and Vucevic, I don't know how old he is, but he's definitely over 25. Like these guys actually have some NBA experience and have at least seen a little bit of playoff time, even though not a ton of playoff success. Meanwhile, all those guys you mentioned for the Cavs, other than Karis LeVert, who's 27, they're all under 25. They're all under actually, I think 23. Darius Garland's 22. Jared Allen's 23. Evan Mobley's what, 20. Like all these guys are so young that it makes it tough. I mean, they do have Kevin Love, who is a champion, but like it's
Not the same.
not the same. Yeah, exactly. It's not the same Kevin Love. He's also coming off the bench. Like those stars, I just think they need an extra like 2 years, and I think I can really say they're contenders.
All right, so that gives us to the next team on this list, the Milwaukee Bucks, led by their MVP caliber, two-time, I think, MVP, right? Two-time MVP Giannis and his phenomenal trio of Middleton and Drew Holiday. What do you got, Brian?
Man, these guys, they're something else. I mean, it's instant contenders. Like they're the champions last year. It's hard not to put the champions as contenders. Like, especially when you could probably say the team got better than last year. It is, barring like you want to see Brook Lopez playing healthy in the playoffs and all that. But like this team is something else. I mean, I don't think I need to explain it too much. So I'll let you go. Instant contenders.
I think this is going to be the easiest one to go through
Yeah.
because I agree. There's not much to say to them. Like they won it last year, so they deserve the respect. And a lot of people always say that usually after you get that first one, it becomes a lot easier to know what it takes to get there. It's not easier to get there; it's just easier to know what it takes. And that's why instantaneously they're a contender in my mind too, and they get hit with that label.
Yeah. It's just Giannis is one of those guys too that's like you have him on your team, you're an instant contender. I don't care what team he is on. Like he can go to the Magic right now. Instant contender in my mind.
Yeah. Agreed. So that leads us into the lower half of the East. And that next team is a blazing hot. Out of the last 10 games, 9-1 Celtics, led by Tatum and Brown and Smart and a multitude of other players. What do you got for the Boston Celtics, Brian?
Blazing hot. They're playing pretty fantastic. They had a terrible start to the season and like not looking well. But man, right now they're looking pretty nice, and it kind of pains me to say this. Well, not really, because it's the Celtics. I'm a Knicks fan, but I'm gonna put them as pretenders. Like you think about it, this team, they have a lot of really good young stars. They're actually starting to put it together. It's just what we kind of mentioned before. If I'm going to put a team like Miami as pretenders, for sure I'm going to put a team like the Celtics as pretenders. I mean, Tatum is definitely a bona fide star. This guy is playing amazing, but there are times where he is a little inconsistent, a little bit too inconsistent for my liking, and he can have those really bad games. But more times than not, he has good games. I want to see him do it more in the playoffs. I think they're still missing some more. Like think about it. They traded a lot of their guys, even though guys that wasn't helping them, but like they just need more. What do you think?
I agree 100%. I've been saying it all season long. Not really a big fan of their management, not really a big fan of how they handle a lot of things. So because of that, even though they're playing so well, they played so well just to get to the 6th seed, and that already right there should just let you know, like, okay, like what you need to know about this 2022 Celtics, and that even though they're playing very, very good basketball right now, is this sustainable? Do I think that it translates in the playoff? Granted, right now where they're seated at, they would be playing a team that they have served to become their kryptonite. the Sixers,
Yeah.
but I still don't think that they would be able to beat them in this version of the Sixers this year. And just don't really like the construction of this team. So because of that, gonna have to hit them with that pretender label. So that leads into our next team, another team blazing hot. 8 out of the last 10 games they've won, led by Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam. It's that Toronto Raptors. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, the Raptors. Another one where it's really tough for me because, I mean, we see them play so well. Their young talent stepping up, playing fantastic. I'm just going to have to put them as pretenders, though, because it's kind of like that same thought process that I had before. If I'm going to, I think there's really 4 teams that are real contenders in the East. And we're missing one more. We named the other 3. Like, it's as much as I would love to put the Raptors, it's kind of the same thing as what the Cavs were, but just a little bit less, where a lot of their young guys, I feel like in an extra 2 years, this team could be something else. I mean, Scotty Barnes is just a rookie. He's playing amazing right now. But, like, imagine Scotty Barnes in 2 years. Like, that's a Raptors team that I can see as real contenders. And a lot of these guys, I mean, even like Fred VanVleet is 27. Gary Trent Jr., who's playing fantastic, is 23. Like, I think in a little more time, they'll be there. It's just right now, there's too much competition. I have to sadly name them pretenders.
This might shock you then, I guess, is, I was in between as well. I still think that my best answer would say that I'm in between on this one. But you know what? I got a reason why I'm going to throw them into contender.
Okay.
So first, as presently standing, who they would be going up against is a team that we just said and just mentioned was pretty green, and the Bulls. Granted, yes, the Raptors have a lot of green players as well, but the reason why I'll give them the contender label is that they're led by 2 players that have done that before. They have seen the summit. They know how to do it. And not only did they do it, there were 2 impactful players of why it happened. Granted, you can say whatever you want about who was there or wasn't there to play in that finals, but they were able to get to that summit and they were able to win it. And that serves to be very, very vital in my mind into how they could mature Scotty Barnes a little bit faster when they get into the playoffs, because they know how to do this. They know this. It's not too far. We're not too far removed from the Raptors being the 2nd seed in the East, and unfortunately losing to the Celtics. But like, if we think about the path of teams that they would have to play to get to the Eastern Conference Finals, based off of right now, it would be the Bulls, then it would be the Sixers. The reason why I think you can look at the Sixers and say, hey, with the uncertainties of injury, the uncertainties of which player is going to get injured, it leads me to think about how mentally tough the Raptors have always shown to be, and how they've always been ready to take on whatever task when they're in the playoffs. And we've seen them taking out some giants before. We've seen them take out the Raptors. Granted, that was with Kawhi. But a lot of these guys learned a lot from that time that they spent. Like I said, those 2 guys specifically. Yeah. And that's why I would give them a contender label right now. It's an interesting one, but it's definitely one I'll put there.
I guess the main pushback that I give here is, like you mentioned, if they played the 76ers, you're like, oh, if there's some injuries there, if there's this and that, like there's a lot of like if statements, then you can see them making it pretty like to the Eastern Conference Finals, sure. But like if they're versing a healthy Sixers. You really think they can beat them in a 4-game series? You think if they verse the Nets, they can beat them in a 4-game series? If they verse Milwaukee, can beat them in a 4-game series? Like, that's where I'm kind of thinking of like these contenders of like, I can see Chicago potentially taking down Milwaukee if things go right, of course, but they can also, it's probably more likely that they lose, but I could see a world where they do win. I don't see like Toronto taking down Milwaukee, taking down a healthy Sixers. Like, do you see that?
I don't see that as of right now, but I think it's still, and I know we're getting closer to the end of the season, but it's still too early for me to rule it out.
Okay.
But based off of where they started off this season, how they've gotten back, and then going back to something that I boasted about for the Heat, is when you have an outstanding coach, which they do, and Nick Nurse,
They do.
You are given a chance at winning the series. And I've seen Doc Rivers fumble the bag aggressively in his career. I've seen him done it one too many times. So I would say, and it's not even recency bias. It's more of like, it's more of just like taking a look at their careers, looking at like guys like I said, Nick Nurse has done more with less.
Yeah.
Doc Rivers has done less with more. So it's that what makes me think that I think they could give a fight. Maybe they won't win the series, but I do see them as a contender because of who they have on the helm, the experience of their star players, and then a budding player that could become a star. And who knows? It could be the moment that we saw with Tyler Hero in the bubble is something we see for Scotty Barnes in this playoffs.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair. That's fair. I think I still would go the other way, but that's where I like, for the listeners, I don't want any of the listeners to think that when we name someone a pretender or like that we're saying that they're bad. Like, no, not at all. Like, all these teams that we named here are playing fantastic basketball. The East is so close right now that honestly anyone can kind of take it. It's just that, when it comes to that 4-game series, as of right now, where things stand, that's where we're kind of basing it off of. But like I said, like, I think in 2 years as well, the Toronto Raptors are going to be a scary, scary team. So we'll see. Especially like you're saying, I like that the playoff experience, and like Fred VanVleet, that's where he kind of made his career. Like, he really blew up in those playoffs and everything. So we'll see going forward. What we got next? So the last one.
The last team. They've been slumping hard. Only winning 2 of their last 10. But bolstering a roster with a soon-to-be back Kevin Durant and soon-to-be back also Ben Simmons and half of a Kyrie Irving. The Brooklyn Nets are the last team on the East. What do you think, Brian?
So this one is it's actually kind of similar in my opinion to like Philly. That easy contender. I mean, look at all the talent they have, where you have Kevin Durant, possibly the best player in basketball, contending with Joel Embiid and Giannis right now, I'd say. But like, I feel like if if Kevin Durant went down, then now it's a real conversation of like, are they pretenders? Are they contenders? That's where I see it really close. But a healthy Nets team, you got Ben Simmons now, who's going to play fantastic. I'm so excited to see how this actually works out. I think it's going to work out really well. I think the fit is perfect. Want to see it play out? Right now, in my mind, the real top 2 are Milwaukee and Brooklyn. So I have to say, easy contender.
Well, Brian, you're getting a little bit too fast into our next topic, man. but I agree. And yeah, honestly, my bias is going to show because I'm a Nets fan. Is that I still hope that they're a contender, but the reasons why I will say that they are going to now land on my pretender list, sadly, is because of the instability that there is this season. I don't think there's enough time for the Nets to figure it out to get to where they need to be this year or want to be this year. We're looking at around 24 games left. If you look at how the East is stacked, from the 6th seed to the 8th, it's about a 3.5 game difference from where the Nets are right now. But currently, the Nets would have to play the Heat, and that's a tough out in that first round. And then you're looking at, let's say the Bucks move up to 4. That's another tough out for if you move into that second round. And then presumably you're seeing someone like the Sixers. At that point, you're exhausted because you had to fight these next 24 games, right?
Yeah.
You had to remain in contention at this point because the Hornets are nipping right at your heels right now. They're only 2.5 games behind you. You have to have a crazy run right now. And how much will that tire out the team? How much of the team's cohesion will happen in that 24 games? And then also the same reasons why I said I put other teams as pretenders and contenders is because of the experience they have at the helm. Steve Nash he's a young coach, and I don't like to give him as much flack as a lot of other Nets fans do. But I just think that he's definitely green. But, a lot of that experience that he was getting last year was getting covered up by just how tremendously talented the players he had around him. And that could be very insulating for a coach that's starting their career, right? So because of that instability, the instability of everything, they do look a lot better now, I'm not going to lie. But the instability with the roster, the not knowing when KD 100% is going to be back, not knowing when Ben's going to be back, not knowing if Kyrie's going to play all the games in the playoffs, leads me to start thinking that this year the Nets might be, sadly, a pretender.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. So I definitely see the points you're saying. The main pushback I kind of think of is I feel like the figuring it out probably isn't going to be too hard, especially just because it's I think the Sixers have to figure out how James Harden and Joel Embiid are going to play together, and especially Joel Embiid doesn't do a lot of pick and roll and all this stuff. That's the kind of figuring it out that it doesn't necessarily make the most sense, but these are two great players that they'll probably figure it out. For the Nets, I think it's a pretty easy plug and play kind of thing. You have someone, Seth Curry. This guy knows exactly what he needs to do. He's already playing extremely well for the Nets. You have someone like Ben Simmons. You don't need to ask him too much. Just play great defense, rebound, and pass the ball to Kevin Durant and Kyrie. To me, it's so easy that it really shouldn't take too long. I do like what you're saying about the question of, does Kyrie play at home games? That could be something. It looks like there's a lot of potential for that getting overturned, and now Kyrie's gonna be able to play at home games, but that's a big if. The Kevin Durant thing, it's very similar, like I said, with Giannis, where if you have Giannis on your team, instant contender. If you have a healthy Kevin Durant on your team, that's an instant contender right there in my mind. Especially what we've seen what he did last year in that playoffs. We're pretty much so close from the Nets being the champions last year. Like, and that's mainly because of Kevin Durant. Especially that wasn't even a fully healthy Nets team. So now you have someone like you have Ben Simmons too. Like, I think I think you're being a little bit too hard on your team here. Like, I think that's a pretty good contenders right there.
All right, so we're finally done with the East.
I was gonna
Are you
say,
ready for the West?
do you want to do the West next week? Because right now we're at an hour and 20 minutes. We have 2 more topics to cover. So I really like going team by team. So I don't want to like try to rush anything because otherwise it's going to be like a 2-hour episode, 2 hours and a half or something. So I
Perfect.
suggest let's do that next week for the West.
So then let's just do the East threats.
Yeah. Okay.
Biggest threat then.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, so we kind of touched on it already. My thing. So the biggest threat, where I was kind of thinking of it as, so like we know that, like I mentioned, you got Brooklyn, you got Milwaukee, like these guys, they are the leaders. So like to me, I'm kind of thinking of as who's a threat to them? Who's like that sleeper kind of team that could actually win it all? And what I have listed down right now are the Chicago Bulls. And we talked about it a little bit. We're like, yeah, they're green. But man, when this team is healthy, you got a healthy Lonzo Ball, you have a healthy Alex Caruso, and all them, like it flows really well. It flows surprisingly well. It is fun basketball to watch. Their offense is amazing. Their defense is fantastic. If they're all healthy by that time of playoff time, which I think it's looking like it's going to be, I think they actually have the potential to beat anyone. Now, of course, like you're saying, there's a little question marks of DeMar DeRozan. Does he show up during the playoffs? But even if he doesn't, you got a guy like Zach LaVine. You got Vucevic, who's so hard to stop, the stretch big and all that. Like, I think they can kind of take down anyone, in my opinion. What do you think?
I agree. They definitely do have that type of mentality that you think that they could potentially be a problem for any team in the East. I I do agree. I do agree. I don't think there's much more to say to it. You put it very well. And I guess that gives way to mine. And just being consistent with what you were saying as well too is like when we think of those contenders like the Nets, the Bucks, the Sixers have ascended to that now.
Yeah.
And you kind of sit there and you think, like not only should this team as a threat be someone that can be beaten, but they also feel that they could beat anyone as well too, and be fearless enough with that. And because of that, my biggest threat is the Miami Heat. The reason why I choose the Miami Heat is because they just have home record vibes. They don't care about how they come there, how they're going to ruin the situation. They're coming there to pillage villages. That's what it feels like. And having guys like adding a guy like PJ Tucker is definitely one of the reasons why I say this, because he's fearless, he's tenacious, and he just doesn't stop. He just doesn't stop. He keeps on coming at you. And when you think about that, if you throw a guy like that on the Sixers, if you throw him to guard someone on the Sixers, who's he guarding? James Harden. James Harden's going to have a nightmare of a series, right? You look at the Bucks. If he's playing against the Bucks, they're going to throw him on Middleton. Middleton's going to have a nightmare of a series. We've already seen this, but granted, because he's the best player in the league, it is a little bit different than a nightmare. It's just night terrors. Let's put it. It's night terrors when he does it. When he does it to Kevin Durant, it's just night terrors is Kevin Durant could still go and get 50, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, like those are the top three contenders in the East, and I think he has an answer to give to every one of those three players and how to defend them. And it doesn't stop there. You have Jimmy Butler coming off the bench. What's wrong with me today? but Jimmy Butler is tenacious as well with his defense. Think about it. They could easily have a team where they're guarding every one of these contenders' best players. Joel Embiid is going to be a little bit hard for them to guard, but they got Bam to contest with him. You have James Harden. He's going to have a nightmare with PJ Tucker. You have Maxi that will not be able to breathe because Kyle Lowry will be hugging him all game long. So like that's one team. You think of the Bucks. They do the same exact thing, implement that same thing around all three of those players. Then you look at the Nets, same thing. Ben Simmons is going to be suffocated by Bam, but it's a little bit different because he's going to be the playmaker. But Bam is versatile in that way, where he can play from the top of the key and then come down with a player into the post, right? So he definitely would be the guy I think they would assign to Ben Simmons. Then you have Kevin Durant, like I said, night terrors, and Kyrie. Kyrie's Kyrie. He's always going to find his buckets. But Kyle Lowry will be on him like bread on cheese. Like, it's going to be this. Like, it's going to be like this. So, I think they have an answer for every one of the contenders, and that's why I think they're my biggest threat.
I think you sold me. Yeah, no, I think you sold me. Like, I had them as pretenders earlier on in this podcast. I think I might have to change my mind of like they really, because I was already 50-50 on them, but like they really are like that scary team. And even just thinking about it, like, I mean, it's so smart for them to have like a black jersey and all that stuff. Like, I picture that. I'm scared. Like, I don't want to verse that team right there. Like, I think you go down the entire Eastern Conference, you tell them like, who are you afraid to verse? I think Miami might be in the top of the list for a lot of those teams. They are a scary, scary team. Still, like you say, on the offensive side, it's a little bit tougher, but like, I mean, still not easy. Like, all those guys are pretty fantastic. I still like try to think like, all right, let's say in a world where Miami does make it through the Eastern Conference and now they're in the finals. I'm still like, can they beat the Suns? Can they beat the Warriors? Like, that's where I'm like, it's really hard to struggle, but I do see them as like one of the biggest threats. Like, they're such a good team for all the reasons that you mentioned. Like, I don't want to repeat it and all, but like, man, I think you changed my mind. You changed my mind.
It's always a great thing on the pod to see a mind has been.
You got me. That was fun. I'm excited for next week when we do the Western Conference, because even the Western Conference, there's a lot going on there that's going to be fun to talk about.
This is by far the most open season I think we've seen in our lives. There's truly not one team that I would say is outside of the box of thinking of them being in the finals right now. But at the same time, there's not one team that I would say they're going to make it to the final 100%.
Yeah.
It's and that's the case for the East. And I think, like you said, the West has that same similar situation where you could be surprised by anyone that makes it to the finals this year out of the West.
Yeah. It's such a toss-up. It's pretty crazy. This is what makes it so much fun. I honestly I hated those years where I could be like when Kevin Durant went to the Warriors like that first year. As soon as that happened, I'm like, oh, the season's over. The Warriors won. It's done. And that's exactly what happened. Like it wasn't even an afterthought. But like this year, it's like I really don't know. Like anyone could be there. It's crazy. Um, since looking at the time, we're at hour 30 right now. We can move that last topic into the weekly roundup, so we can go through it pretty quickly. So let's do that. Let's go into the weekly roundup. So one, Bembry is joining the Bucks. Joining the Bucks. Jeff, I know you've been pretty high on Bembry this entire season, and now he's going to the enemy. What do you think about the situation?
It's just makes me more upset at James Harden because that would have been a player that didn't have to move if the James Harden trade didn't have to go, right? And the Nets were picking and choosing who was easiest to expend because they could not make that trade for Nick Claxton come to fruition at the end of the trade deadline. They were looking at a few offers. I think they spoke with the Raptors about a deal, and then that fell apart. So it sucks that he's gone, but he's definitely going to be someone. Injury is giving way to the reason why he's on that team. I don't know if 100% he'll fit or mesh the same way with the Bucks because he's going to be replacing Pat Connaughton for this time, and they play two completely different styles of basketball. And is that truly what the Bucks are needing, are looking for right now? So it might be good player, decent player, but just not the right fit in my mind. And he may see himself not being with that team too long. But if they figure out a way to keep him on the floor, pair him probably off the well, obviously he's going to be on the bench, but with a guy like Grayson Allen, because he does have a little bit of a shot, and you have him as a slasher at that wing position, and you go small, so to speak. You run a Middleton, Giannis, and potentially whoever is backup point guard lineup. You could see that working for them, and you could see that being a little bit interesting to see for the Bucks. But it also is kind of the Bucks only have really one true slasher is Giannis because they need to open up the space for him. So we'll see.
Yeah, like you're saying, decent player, not really the greatest fit. I mean, as you see, what do they look for in players? A player that can play good defense and shoot threes. That's mainly what they want. And Bembry doesn't really shoot the three, so he fits into one of those categories. So be interesting to see how that turns out. There's a report on Goran Dragic. He got bought out. And right now the report is that the Bucks are leading this charge and potentially signing Goran Dragic. What do you think about that?
My God, that's all I got to say. I don't even want to talk about it.
It's I guess let's talk about it more if it actually happens, because a lot could change.
I would love for him to just go to Miami, but as that.
Yeah, right. That'd be really nice. But that would be interesting to see, especially like when the Bucks gave up Dante DiVincenzo. Like now you got your replacement right there, and that'd be pretty crazy. Tristan Thompson to the Bulls. Do you really have much thoughts there?
Just added depth. With Patrick Williams out. I know I saw some reports about him getting closer to coming back, but with him out, added depth is nothing too crazy on that side.
Exactly, nothing too crazy. The last thing I want to touch on is there are some reports about Tom Thibodeau being on the hot seat. So there's reports right now from Ian Begley that's like William Wesley, who is like the VP of basketball operations, and then James Dolan, the owner of the Knicks. They're both feeling like the problems of the Knicks fall on Tom Thibodeau, and that he's the reason why that they're playing so poorly. There's always been a lot of contention, or at least a lot of different thoughts in the Knicks front office, especially like in reports in the past of like who to draft and stuff like this. But as well, Tom Thibodeau is pretty frustrated that the Knicks didn't make any any trade deadline moves. The report is he wanted to trade young players and first round picks to get some veterans on this team to potentially try to win now. I think that's a terrible idea, but Jeff, what do you think about the situation on Tom Thibodeau, and does he potentially get fired this season?
So 2 things. First thing, and it's not about Tom Thibodeau. Leon Rose, when are we going to see this guy? When is he ever going to speak up about what he's created, right? He's created this environment. Second thing is this is the path you chose. You knew when you picked Tom Thibodeau over Kenny Atkinson, you chose to have a coach that wants veterans. So to be surprised by it or be upset with that's his mindset just makes no sense to me. And it shows that like the Knicks had a very good, interesting way of, putting a gauze in our face about what truly they were doing. Like that the front office was doing better. And now we're just seeing it's just as bad as it has always been. Not at its lowest points as where it's been, but it's as dysfunctional as it's been in the past. Obviously, not a lot of things are getting leaked out as much now, so we don't know a lot about everything that's going on. But for you to have these reports coming out now, it's showing there is a divide within the front office where there is some people that think we should go the young route, and we should have went the young route the whole time that we were considering this. And there's a side of this that is saying, let's go the other way and just double down on what we're already doing. At this point, it only makes sense to double down because that's the path you chose. But is it the best decision for the Knicks? I don't think so. And it sucks because you would have to get rid of Tom Thibodeau to do that.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see of like how poorly this goes. And like you say, last season, I mean, at the end of the day, winning solves every single problem. So any problem you have, if you start winning, everyone looks fantastic. It doesn't matter who it is. And so that's where like you can definitely see some dysfunction that was even reported last season on like who do they want to draft, how did it go? William Wesley like being shirtless during calls and like playing I think New York State of Mind during like draft conversations and stuff like this, and like really weird stuff. This got out, but like no one really cared because the team is playing well. And now team is playing poorly. Who everyone look at? The coach. The first thing everyone always talks about is the coach. Where I kind of fall in this situation is kind of similar to like the Frank Vogel situation that we talked about a few weeks ago of I don't think it's the coach's fault when your players are playing terrible and you got guys injured and all this other stuff, like can't really do anything about it. Where the Knicks are just like players are just not making shots. I think I said there's a number of like in a previous or last season, there was only one player that shot under 43% from the field. That was Emmanuel Quickly. This season, every player but one player is shooting under 43%. And that was Derrick Rose, who's been injured for like the last 2 months. The team is just not playing well. They're not making their shots. And a lot of times, like in my opinion, they have wide open shots. It's just they're not going down. And you kind of can't put this on the coach. Now, there's some like maybe lineup such things, and there's some like questionable. I think when RJ Barrett got hurt like a week ago, there's no reason for RJ Barrett to be in the game when they're clearly the game was like it was like a they were down like 15 with like 5 minutes left. And Tom Thibodeau decided to put RG in, and then the last like 2 minutes he sprained his ankle. Like there's no reason for him to be in that game. Um, but like it just makes it tough. But like everyone just kind of focuses on the coach, and it seems like there definitely is the possibility of Tom Thibodeau getting fired, especially coming off of last season's Coach of the Year award. Like, it's pretty funny. We saw this before, not as bad as when the Raptors fired Dwayne Casey just right after he won the award. that was pretty funny.
You know, it's funny. I think it was he got fired beforehand.
Oh,
he got the award, and that's in that off season.
Yes, you're right about that. That's
because they have the award show, I believe.
Yep, you're right. That's so funny.
Yeah, no, so this is another thing that I think it sucks because the Knicks, it seems like, can never get out of this because they're going to always suffer with this, is the curse of being luxury, right?
Yeah.
There's always the need to get the most flashy coach or get the most well-known names as executives. And because of that, you start to realize, like, those guys, the reason why they're the flashy names are they're the executives that that everybody knows their names is because they were a part of the past. And it's sad to say that, is that it's the truth. Look back on every one of the guys that the Knicks have chosen to be a part of the a part of their execs. And when they were chosen, it was a part of their past. Phil Jackson. Obviously, Leon Rose is different. But he was an agent, you know. You have William Wesley, Worldwide West, right? A past. Like, he was someone they were talking about in the early 2000s, you know. Isaiah Thomas, all guys that were already past their prime of being able to be that exec. Honestly, the only way I think the Knicks get out of this is finding a way to pry Pat Riley out of Miami. And I don't think that that's ever happening. But if you could find a way to get a Pat Riley to come back to New York and do that job for the Knicks, like, I don't think there's anyone that has the experience and the biggest name and the cachet that could effectively do it than him, you know? Yeah. But if that's not the path, stop doing this. Like, that's the problem. They're always going to keep on doing this.
Yeah.
And it's always going to lead to the issues that we're seeing now.
I think I'm a little bit less like super hard on this front office specifically, mainly because there's a lot of things that at the moment sounded really nice. So like we look at some of the decisions that they made of drafting Obi Toppin over like a Halliburton. The reason why they did this is because they drafted Obi Toppin to be Julius Randle's replacement. They were trying to trade Julius Randle before he blew up last season. They're trying to do all this stuff, and they couldn't make it happen. And next thing you know, Julius Randle becomes your best player. Now you kind of got screwed because now Obi Toppin's going to play 8 minutes a game or something like that. And then you got a lot of these offseason acquisitions. Pretty much everyone was kind of like, these are great moves. These are smart moves that they're making. This is this and that. Like, even like the Kemba Walker stuff, like these were like good decisions. They should have worked out. It's just that so far, all of them at the end of the day, as good as they looked on paper, haven't really turned out to be the greatest. So that's where like I'm a little less harsh on the front office. And I'm even less harsh on Tibbs, where like I don't think it's his problem. There is, like he's mentioned too, when you hire Tibbs, you knew what you were getting. You knew you're getting a guy that likes to overplay a lot of his players, who hates playing young players and likes to play a lot of vets, and that wants to trade all your young players for more vets because that's all he cares about. I mean, look what he did when he was president of Minnesota, where he traded Zach LaVine for Jimmy Butler, and then look how well all that turned out. Like, it's this guy has this reputation, and it's kind of showing up again. But you knew what you were kind of signing up for, so that's where it kind of makes it interesting. They did some hedges on like his contracts. I think he's like he got like a 5-year contract, but I think the last 2 aren't guaranteed. The assistant coach that they got was kind of always Johnny Bryant. He was always kind of put as, if Tibbs gets fired, this guy is the replacement. And that's where there are already reports of like Johnny Bryant is potentially going to be the next head coach. I mean, he will be the interim head coach, but they're also considering him to be the official head coach afterwards. And like, if Tibbs gets fired, it's a really interesting situation. It's a whole mess. Everyone's losing. I mean, the Knicks are losing, so you got to be super critical on them. And you kind of mentioned it too, where when you're in this luxury, kind of place like a New York, where everyone has their eyes on, it's so hard to rebuild. It's so hard to rebuild there because everyone is expecting them to play well. And we saw them play terrible for the last decade, and yet there's still nothing. Maybe 2 decades. Like, so bad. All right, and that is the episode. Jeff, do you have anything else you wanna close out on?
I think that's it, Brian. We hit a lot today. It was a good episode.
It's another episode where like I am not expecting it to be very long, and the next we're an hour 47 in, and we still like went a little bit short on some things, and like we pushed the Western Conference part for next week. So I'm excited for that. Again, to all the listeners, if you like these long episodes, let us know. If you want a little bit shorter, you want to make this more digestible, if you want more 45 minutes, an hour, or something like that, let us know as well. We aim to make you happy. But I love talking about basketball. We love talking about basketball. We can do this for 3 hours, like no problem. So it's always a lot of fun. And that is episode 21.